Okay, recording now. Okay, guys, welcome to Artist Masterclass featuring M Cubed. Today we have three other special artist students joining us. We have Gabe, we have Jonathan Jeevs, and we have Seth. All three different students. Once again, feel free to ask any questions based on any song from M Cubed. We could, if you had a song in mind that you'd like Mike to go over, feel free to say anything about that so that Mike can have more of a sense of a direction to go through instead of him just like going about random things. It can probably lead to less details being explained. So if you had a song in mind, definitely tell him about it. And if you do have any other like questions, whether it's mixing or other things in mixing like compression or saturation or just grouping things together, etc., or his mastering chain, feel free to abuse Mike to the most.
Right.
Yeah, no secrets.
No secrets here, guys. No secrets here.
It's all in the spectrum.
Okay, cool.
What's the first move? Who wants to?
And I guess the first move is you could start off if no one has a song, I would say choose a very not a complicated well, it could be a complicated song, but something you're really proud of, not only compositionally but mix as well.
We're gonna break down "Thirsty" to start with. I think that sounds like
Yeah.
that's also
Okay. I was gonna recommend 70. That's my favorite one.
I think 78 is on my desktop, sadly.
Oh no, this is so sad. It hits already.
Is that the one
yeah.
you said?
Rumba.
Roomba.
Oh, Roomba, yes.
Yeah, it's not a rumba. I don't know what. I think that's Spanish. Like a Roomba is like a Spanish dance.
I guess what you could do right now, Mike, is just introduce yourself and like what you've been going through as like a producer, and your journey in terms of like production.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started producing in 2011, and more recently I've kind of shifted away from like the more traditional electronic style and tried to incorporate a lot of more acoustic elements and also just like kind of push myself further into like different areas. So I've been listening to a lot of like punk and surf rock and stuff like that, just to kind of expand my palette. Because like when I was a kid, like from the ages of probably 14 to 17, I just to Skrillex and literally like else. And so I got really into the dubstep and the bro step and all of that, but I didn't really expand until probably like 2013 or something. So like the last 4 or 5 years, that's what I've been focusing on.
Okay.
I'm trying to get into my project files and I forget where I put them because I haven't used my laptop in a while.
Oh, I've got a question while you do that. Do you remember Pursuit Records by any chance?
I do. Holy shit! Yeah. When was that?
I remember those days. Holy. Yeah, I noticed you were on that old record label. Like, I remember like they signed one of my tracks and then they never released it.
That's like the highlight of the label.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
Amazing.
Like, I'm glad, because like that's how I met a lot of friends through like music and everything, like all through Pursuit Records.
It was so ridiculous. Like the guy who ran it,
shit, though.
yeah, the guy who ran it was just like running a scam. I don't know what was happening. It was just a whole mess.
Like nobody received any money from any of the tracks on there. Like it was just, except for maybe Luminescence or whatever. He was like one of the owners, right? So.
Yeah, I don't remember what song I released there. It was like kind of a more traditional future bassy kind of sounding thing. Like it wasn't my best track, but he like messaged me and I was like, oh yeah, I've got this track laying around. And then it happened and everybody like freaked out because like I posted it and then like you and a couple other people commented and were just like, yeah, this is garbage. Like we need to get off this record label. Like you're too good for this or something. And I was like, oh, that's sweet.
What? That's so mean. Wow.
It's because everybody's been screwed over by this fucking guy who ran Pursuit.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember. I think I may have messaged you at that point. I'm not sure.
Get ready for stuff like that, Gabe. Keep your eyes open, dude. Keep your eyes open.
Keep my eyes open for what? People trying to screw me over? What?
Yes, keep your eyes open. Watch out.
Jesus.
Hello.
Hello?
Hey, John. How's it going?
Okay, so
Just looking at
Oh,
stuff
you just...
there between me and him.
Okay, cool. Bro, this slaps. Hey, so Mike, this is actually a question that I want to start everything off with that I feel like could apply to all of us. I don't know if you guys know, but Mike has a really good way of writing songs, or at least in my opinion, he is really consistent with completing projects, which is something that a lot of people struggle with when they're being,
Yep.
a producer or when they're working just in general. Finishing things is usually a hard thing to do, and Mike generally has a good way of going about that. And I actually don't know much about it as much either. I've seen it, but I'd like for Mike to actually talk about his journey of arranging songs and finishing things and start to end, just what goes on and how did you like grow this healthy songwriting development.
Yeah, I'm a pretty solid finisher. I like the finish. I like to
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
I definitely have struggled with that in the past because there was a period of time last year where I was really busy with work and stuff because I had just moved into a new place, and so I was like kind of struggling to get my feet back under me. And during that period, I was like overall less confident and like had trouble thinking of the bigger picture, and it affected my music as well. Like that reflected in my music writing style because I was writing a lot of good stuff, but it wasn't cohesive, and it wasn't like I was having more trouble finishing it, and so I had to work on my own finishing process during that time period. So I would say that the most important thing for me is not to get stuck on one element too much, like especially early on when you're starting a track. It's really easy to like build a loop and then try to make that loop sound perfect instead of building a loop and thinking about what would come next, because usually for me the inspiration comes when I start improvising for what would come next. I build that next section, and then that transition can be totally reworked later on. So like I'll start with like, let's say, a dorky chord progression, right, and then from there you can progress into something else, and then you keep going, you come back and you're like, man, this chord progression sucks. You either cut it or you can kind of rework it so that it fits with your next piece. So kind of think about it on a more holistic level. So you're like, all right, I'm building the track. Maybe you get to the drop, or you can even start with the drop, whatever you want to do, and then the other pieces kind of fall into place as you keep moving. So it's more important. Like there have been times where I'll write something and then I'll write the next and I'll write the next piece, and then I'll come back and I'll be like, oh man, this is garbage, and I'll delete it. And then I'll keep going, I'll keep building, I'll keep adding, and I'll come back and I'm like, man, this is garbage, and I'll keep deleting it. So it's like the track may not end up having anything that I originally started with, but it keeps me moving forwards rather than focusing on one section and just like getting stuck in one little loop. Right. So I think that's a really important mindset to have, just to like keep building off of whatever you've created, even if it's not what you're going to end up using. So, if something is imperfect, think about why it's imperfect. Sure, like you can analyze it, but mostly think, okay, what could I build out of this? Like, what could this lead into that would sound cool or better than this?
So creating possibilities is a very healthy practice, I feel.
Yeah.
I actually shared the story a couple of times of how our friend Abe would always focus on like simple things like the snare when we were collabing, and like we had to wait a whole hour or two. Remember that, Mike?
Oh yeah, that was a big like collab disaster, but it was still kind of fun. I'm seeing if my MIDI controller works right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just butt in and just like get Mike's attention.
Yeah, feel free to go for it, and I'll show up down thirsty here in a second.
How do you go about like for example, in your song Found, there's the one sound in the intro, and I guess this is really specific, but it's like that background sort of like texture thing that's here. Wait, let me find it.
Yeah, here I'll bring it up as well. Yeah, wait, a background kind of sound, like a little fuzzier sound or something, or
yeah, it kind of like, it seems like it's pretty like really stereo heavy, at least in my headphones.
That's
like
Mike's specialty.
Yeah, and that's one thing I want to learn about too, because I just kind of heard about that the other day from Elijah, and I've been trying to learn more about like stereo separation.
Yeah, it's super important to leave space. Like I love making stuff that's really wide so that it makes more room for more layers without it like masking too much.
Yeah.
So wait, are you thinking about like the little white noise thing or like this little synth?
Not the plug, the white noise thing that's sort of like oscillating in the background.
That little white noise thing in the background? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was, I'm pretty sure, probably just like a white noise sample. Actually, I might have done something similar with Thirsty. We're about to find out, because I think this is a little atmospheric. Yeah, hang on. Wait, turn this up. Jesus, sounds terrifying. So this is just over processed, and that's why it's really quiet. So I literally had it at -18 over there. This also, sadly, is not my current mastering process. I'll show you this in a second. It's just with Isotope. But anyway, so like this one is really over processed, so it's like overdriven. There's a flanger which can give some stereo as well, because right now it's phased. So right now it's like affecting the two different channels, like left and right, at different times as this goes through. Same thing. It's literally 100% verb, so there's no signal, and the size is very small, which increases how it feels like it's really close and really wide. So it feels like either side of you.
Check out that stereo knob on the reverb as well.
And then at OTT, where those stereo past 100, we go all the way up to 120, baby.
I guess that's something special.
I've heard that.
I apologize.
It's all good. But I've heard, and I basically just watched seamless videos, because who hasn't done that? But I heard that if, like, let's say you have a track like that, and there's sections that are really wide, and then let's say you would go and you would play it, a lot of like live venues and shit have all their systems are apparently mono. So, and he said there's like a lot of danger in that if you have a really wide stereo width on a project, and then when you convert it to mono, apparently there can be like really weird phasing issues or something like that. I don't remember.
You can definitely have, I mean, I'm sure any of my tracks that you put a mono on would sound stupid, because I do use a lot of ridiculous stereo.
But has that been an issue at any point?
It is not, because at this point, most venues are going to have a stereo system. So any venue that I've worked at, I also work as an audio engineer. So literally every venue in Austin is stereo. You're never going to run into somebody trying to run your DJ set in mono unless you're at like a really, really tiny venue or something. So for the most part, you're going to run into issues, because the only thing that comes out is stereo. So like if I'm mixing a DJ, I have a left and right channel from the DJ booth. That goes on 2 channels on my console, and I'm mixing it left and right panned, so they're going to the 2 different speakers. And then the only thing that comes out that's quote unquote mono is going to be if you have like a stereo fill or like a sound fill speaker that's like in the middle of the stage, if that makes sense. But that is up on the console, and so it's not affecting where you're coming from, so you don't have to worry about that getting into issues.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, no, I remember when I was first learning about stereo separation, I did the same thing. I was like, yeah, stereo everything, and then somebody was like, watch out, and I was like, what? I was like, I just want it to be wide.
Honestly, I guess to counter, to say something as a counter to that, there is like a thing about it though. Like if you do play Mike's songs on a phone, I'm pretty sure you'll still hear those plucks on a phone, because of how the processing can also add other types of information as well to the sound, as well as the volume in general can also make the sound that he's using more present. So if the sound he's using, even though very stereo, is a focal point, you will probably be able to still hear it in a way.
The phone versus or phone or laptop. It's smart to do phone and laptop checks, also car checks. I literally listen to everything that I write in my car.
I've done that too.
Hear it on that system. So I highly recommend that, because that will bring out those 1 or 2 weird things where you're like, why does that sound bizarre? And you're like, maybe a stereo issue.
I had a question before I have to go soon, unfortunately, but it was just with 808s, honestly. Like sometimes whenever I try to like saturate them a lot, it really like distorts them. So like I put I put a little bit of distortion on there. Like I try to edit with the wavetable, and I put like compressors on there and whatnot, but like it still somehow sounds like really distorted, especially with like lower notes, right? And like you can't get them loud enough without them clipping a ton.
Yeah. There are ways to do it. So I was looking here because I forget what I did for Thirsty here, but apparently I had a bass sound that I just recorded, which is audio. So I think this is just from one of my keyboards, which sadly we can't hear on the laptop speakers. But I can at least kind of like show, even if you can't hear, for the 808s, what I generally do. So using saturator or other like compression and distortion effects, you can really kind of push it as long as you limit the range that you're hitting. Another option here, rather than cutting it all the way out, the reason I do this is because I have a lot of other mid-rangey stuff in here. So like if I didn't have as much mid-rangey stuff, if I was doing a more traditional kind of trap arrangement where there's a sub and there's like a high lead, the sub can take up more of the space. And rather than having it like this, a really cool trick is to be able to like maybe leave this one here, but then duplicate the chain. So like, I don't know how to do this in other programs, but in Ableton, you can duplicate a chain like this. And then when I delete it off this, or actually I'll leave that there and just move it. Now I have two versions of this going through the same thing. So like this is coming through low, and then this is coming through high, and I can affect the high end differently. And from here, to keep it from getting too distorted, I can then kind of put something else on it, maybe verb it out or have this part be wide. You know, like Sam Galatry does a lot of really wide 808s, and that's typically how he does it, because the low end is still really mono, right? So I can keep this mono. I can even put a utility or whatever I need to. Jesus, this is kind of overprocessed. The other channel or the other copy of the chain can then have something to like widen it. So I can put a reverb on this and then make this that stupid wide stereo like I did for that other one, right? So this will kind of give you a less distorted high end, and then your low end won't sound distorted because the curve kind of adds higher harmonics that don't come out in this area.
Okay, no, that's really good to know. Thanks.
So that's like some stuff to play with for your 808s. That's, I think, really important. Also, something to think about for 808s is where they sit in relation to your drums. So depending on what you're doing, a lot of people nowadays, including Sam Galatry in some situations, will have the 808 hit higher, right? So I'll maybe like cut this up to like 65 or 68 and then have this like a little bit higher as well maybe. But for the most part, I'm keeping this here so that I can put my kick lower. So right now, for this, the opposite. So you can choose which one you want to sit. Basically, your kick or your sub, you have to choose whether one is hitting at like 50 or 60, or one is hitting at like 80 or 100, somewhere in there. You know, like you get to choose which to sit, and you want them to be as like kind of next to each other as possible. You don't want them to be in the same position. And so that'll also help with like any distortion kind of sounding stuff on your 808. Because if it sometimes is your kick hitting at the same time, that sounds like it's masking or kind of ducking other stuff out of the way.
Yeah, I usually have my kick like boosted in like the 50 to 100 range, and then like for my 808, I usually have it. I always try to keep it like so they're not exactly the same, but yeah, I always like to drop the 808 a little bit lower to like maybe like the 30 range.
Yeah, and you'll find different spots, like depending on what system you're listening on, you'll find different spots where it cuts out, right? Like, so for me, when I'm listening, on my normal monitors, I have like little 5-inch JBLs, and on those, since I don't have a sub, everything kind of cuts out around like 40 or 35. So sadly, if something's hitting and it's hitting that low, whatever note is, I think Ableton shows me. Yeah, if it's hitting like this low C or low D or something, right? That 36 somewhere in here, it's probably not going to pick up even on my monitors. And so you just kind of have to like be aware that if you're putting something that low, you want to see some of the harmonics boosted as well. Does that make sense? So like if I do this, let me see if I can find a spot where this plays. And just kind of loop it really quick.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have to go to my grad fashion show, but
Shit, that's
this is being recorded, correct?
Yeah, this will be recorded. Also,
Right.
I mean, if you have any other questions that you want me to say, just type them to me and I'll say them.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah,
Dude.
Thanks for that advice on the 808s, man. Have a good one.
yeah.
Thanks for joining, dude.
No problem.
All right, sweet. Is John still here?
I'm just.
Hello,
Dude,
yes.
John is just taking it all in, dude. He's just letting it all sink in.
So since this is just a single sine. It's not giving me a whole lot, even when it's saturated super hard.
Oh
At this
yeah,
point,
it's
I
not,
wouldn't be this. I would be using operator or something else to build a sine wave or a sub. I don't remember why I did this for this song, but if I had operator, then I would put a little bit of either like a triangle, or I would put just a little bit of FM on the original sine wave to give it
Mhm.
more of the higher frequencies. Because this one, there's not enough in between here. So like it's
Yeah.
hitting low and it's hitting at like whatever this is, 40, but there's nothing in the 50 range that's coming up. There's only the next harmonic way up here at 100 and
Mhm.
what.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some things to think about for 808s.
operator is like the 3x oscillator for FL Studio, by the way, in case you didn't.
Okay.
Does it?
That makes sense.
Oh, okay. The 3x oscillator is FM as well.
I
No,
don't think it
it's
does.
not
No.
FM. Never mind. It's like
Yeah,
our.
no,
It's okay. Sorry, it's like our Citrus then, because Citrus
Okay.
is FM.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's see here.
So, yeah, wait, what were we talking about before the 808s? I feel like there was something good.
Just like sound design stuff, getting like more unique textures and kind of like taking I think my issue right now is like I'm learning a lot about how to make like some basic sounds, and I've worked on trying to make them sound better,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just different for me to try to learn at this point how to like expand and make something that sounds a little more unique.
Yeah.
I mean, that can go in any direction at all, but
A lot of the time for me, so like if I'm doing something that's kind of a basic tone, so if I'm building like a little pluck or something,
Yeah.
a lot of the important elements come out of the post synth processing, like the effects that I add to it, and to get a lot of the like really wide sounds. So I do use a lot of distortion. I don't I steer away from overdrive nowadays just because it is really hard to get something that sounds smooth out of it. I end up
Mhm.
having to like put an overdrive in and then put a shit ton of EQ right after.
Mhm.
But if I'm making something that I want to sound like a little more interesting, a lot of it comes from verb or delay, and then I just kind of meld that shape around it. So like if I have the verb, the size of your room for your reverb is really important, and I think you can do stuff like this in like pretty much any reverb plugin.
Yeah.
And then same thing for like where your reverb is pulling from. So oftentimes I'll build like a pluck, and only the top end will be into the verb. So I'll like put this little input processing filter on it and stuff like that. And that just helps like give it a lot of character. And then usually here, so what I do nowadays is often medium or hard curve saturation, and then just take the output down. That way it's not too loud.
Yeah.
I used to mix loud as fuck and just like slam the master, and now I'm trying to be a little more.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, Elijah knows that I used to just be like loud as fuck.
That was literally the first thing I said to Mike. Like once I hung like at his place, I was like, "Dude, you literally just smash everything," and then he's like, "Yeah, love it."
And at the time, it worked, and it still does for a certain style of music.
I loved
because-
it though. I personally loved it. Not to make it come off as negative or anything. It worked.
Yeah, like it's really useful when you're doing more like it's kind of like if you're doing something that's sparsely layered but you want it to sound full, it's really helpful because it then fills in all those gaps with the harmonics that the distortion is giving you. But nowadays I like to have a little more space because I'm building stuff that's kind of a little more it's like nuanced. Like I want every little transient to come through more often. So even this song, Even Thirsty, is way more spacious and transient than other stuff that I did in the past. On the drum side of things, like everything is kind of flipped a little bit shorter, even though it's still distorted as fuck. It's like smoother. I made sure to like kind of leave more space for stuff, which I think is important.
Also, guys, I just want. Oh, sorry.
Whatever you're building, like it depends a lot on the track. Like what you're going for long term is a different discussion, but like within each track, you're gonna find different things that work. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I was just trying to say. Also, note that something that's being brought up a lot so far has been a lot of compromising of of EQ or the sound before he does the post processing. Notice how he has to, if he wants to do something special, he has to make a compromise by either taking away or making something less loud in order to get a better final product of a sound.
Yeah, and that's what I was just gonna bring up too, because I mean, Elijah, you know, like you saw, like the first time I think I tried, and I just wanted to try to throw in as many layers as possible, and I of course had no idea what I was doing, so like, sure there was all these different layers, but I mean they were all EQ'd really weird, and it was just like a bad mix. So that's another thing right now that I'm trying to get down, is just improving my mix a lot too. Really trying to just improve everything, but you know.
No, mixing standpoint, the biggest thing for me has come down to like proper arranging as well. And people always say that, they're like, oh, mastering doesn't matter, you can just mix. And then they're like, oh, mixing doesn't matter, you can just arrange. And then like all this, it's like it's kind of true, because the later processes, like the later steps, will be much easier if the original like stuff is there, if it's laid out in a way that makes a lot of sense. So like for me, if I'm making sure that I'm building all of my layers so that there's space, like leaving space for a snare if I want my snare to stand out is really important. Most often nowadays, I don't like my snare standing out as much as I used to, because like I said, I used to make a lot of dancier stuff, and now I've kind of been leaving a little bit for something that's kind of low key, or I want my chords or my melodies to take the forefront of your attention, and so I don't care if the drums are more in the background, and things like that. So like that's an important element of mixing, just like thinking about what you want people to pay attention to, because like you can listen to some of Sam Glatry's songs and his like drums are mixed really quiet, but they still hit really hard because he's either sidechained them or just left the perfect little slot in all of the other elements, you know. So if I have a track like this, so this little piano, I didn't want it to be interfering at all with, so I'm literally cutting like 12 decibels at 3K, right, because that's where my lead's going to be. So that makes a big difference, like cutting a lot, like being super heavy-handed with your EQs. I don't remember some of the stuff I did on this one, but yeah, see, like anything that I wanted to not be in the background or not be in the foreground is cut high, and then maybe a boost in the mid. So like this little thing, I think was, I'm just going to play this synth group. Man, my computer is struggling. Get that buffer size. All right, well, my CPU is still spiking up to 110%. Anyway, yeah, so like just building those kind of layers so that like anything that's playing at the same time leaves space for each other, and then from the arranging process, making sure that the stuff that's playing at the same time needs to be playing at the same time. So often, like I'll like try to beef up a kick or beef up a snare, and really it just needs a hi-hat to play along with it. So like there's a reason that these, you know, traditional rock patterns are successful. It's because the hi-hat playing on every 8th note, every 6th note or whatever, 16th note or whatever, is really helpful for like maintaining energy through these things. So like you want your drums to all like complement each other, and like your hi-hat doesn't have to have any low end if it's only playing with a kick or whatever. You know, you can just kind of think about like shaping things so that they work really well together. So I would just say like be more heavy-handed with EQs, focus a lot on like arranging and timing so that if stuff is hitting at the same time, it's really, really balanced so that nothing is getting masked. Another really useful thing, I don't remember if I did it very much in this. Yeah, I did a little bit. So you can use delay to like make sure that things are hitting, you know, 24 milliseconds before or after, which doesn't sound like a lot, but makes a huge difference when you're thinking about transients. So like something that hits all at once might sound really strong, but it's not going to sound as clean as if a bunch of elements all hit, you know, kind of in the same area. This kind of adds more of like a live element to it. It sounds more natural, and it'll sound louder because it's taking up, you know, 60 milliseconds worth of space with a loud transient from like 3 different things, you know, things like that.
Okay, sweet.
That delay sort of concept I only started using like a year ago, and it's just so helpful for me because it allows me to do stuff with my drums. It allows me to do stuff with the synths that normally I would have to go in and kind of move stuff around. Another useful thing that Ableton has that I'm not sure if it's in other stuff is a swing generator or a groove generator. So it's literally like moving stuff around just a tiny bit. If I hit commit, you'll see all these move over just a little bit, right? That's a groove generator is so useful because it just makes everything sound a little more natural, and it helps things kind of hit at different times.
All right, sweet.
Yeah.
So,
answer about me.
Mike, if possible, would it be, because your CPUs are already spiking on one channel, I was gonna say, would it be cool to like go through the whole drop, the most complicated section, to show as like a bigger picture example of it actually being like I wanted. Okay, so the question was if you could play the drop, and then talk about how you were able to make everything fit in the drop and how it smacks.
Yeah. Let's try and play it. I don't know what's gonna happen. I have this all as low as it goes and as high as it goes, but it's not helping too much yet. We'll see. Oh wait, with solo. Good God. That's terrifying.
Here, if that's not gonna work, I can just like here. I'll at least just listen to it
Yeah,
on
listen.
SoundCloud.
Yeah, just go to SoundCloud and listen to it.
Honestly, that's
Honestly, that's genius. That's so genius.
Fuck my life. That nice transition out. So yeah, that it is one of the more like hectic B sections that I've made in a while, and it's kind of the swing is stronger in this than in other tracks that I've done. So like everything is pretty much swung along that same groove. This Logic 16 step down 60. Highly recommend. So this basically is the kick pattern that I actually pitched. So like I don't often do this, but it helped a lot in this track because I wanted everything to sound more melodic. I didn't want anything to sound like it was like rooted in anything. So it's a lot spacier because everything sounds like a synth instead of the each drums are kind of weird and spaced out. This little pattern was made with the slice of like it's like an African dance beat loop. At least I can find it really quick. That's the original loop. And so this all sliced up kind of built the groundwork for that track. So like I think this was one of the first things that I layered. So kind of layering all of that so that it's spaced out. The kicks are all pretty like constant, and so I wanted to make sure they were really short. So this I maybe warped or something. I forget what I did to it. It's just a relatively short sample, I guess. And I compressed it, and then the way that this works with the bass. Now I messed around with this earlier when I was showing something to Violight, so I don't remember what I did to it. I think I just did this. So I only have the sub hitting every now and then, so it's less frequent than the kick. And then in terms of how I kind of put the synths into place around it, I think there's some side chaining going on, but I forget how much we're trying to pull through here. So all of this is really short because I used Ableton's beat warping, and then you can shorten each transient. So I don't know if there's other ways to do that in other programs, but it's really, really helpful because that leaves so much extra space while maintaining the verb that was on the original sample. So like this is a slice that I resampled of another synth that I made. I think it's this one. And that's just a recording from a keyboard that I have, the Korg M50.
So, Mike, would you be able to show us the natural, none-edited transient of the audio file that you were explaining before? Just to give us a visual representation of what's happening.
Yeah, so this one, if I do, let me see if I can do like a bigger chunk of it. I'm not as fast with my Mac hotkeys, sadly. All right, so if I take out that transient warping, it sounds fucking stupid.
Oh.
That actually might sound tight. Not as cool because it's not as. All right, so I just undid that, and now I went back to the 42. So it's basically just shortening notes.
Huge difference though. Huge difference.
Yeah, and it just leaves more space for other things to happen. So like, who was saying that they like made a track with like a bunch of layers, right? Like that. Yeah. That's a like a common thing, and like when you're adding on layers, it's really easy to get lost in that and like think, oh, I just need something else to make it sound more full, when oftentimes what you can do is make each element more full. So if I have drums, bass, synth, and like some other lead synth or something like that, so like 4 layers, but I make each one kind of stand out in their own space and then make sure that they play off of each other really well, then you don't need to add more layers. So even if I have a that I'm like, man, this synth isn't hitting hard enough, maybe I'll make another synth on top of it. Instead of doing that, I usually will, unless there's some like arrangement issue. So like if I have a synth that's in a low register and I'm like, okay, I like that it sounds good in the low register, but it doesn't sound good in the high register, that's the time to add another layer. And you can be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna have this synth down here, and then when you're doing realistic arranging like that, it gives it a more natural tone overall, because it's almost like you have different people playing each of those instruments, right? Like each instrument is kind of feasible or like sounds realistic to be played. Like it sounds like it could be played on an actual synth in some situations. Obviously, when you're doing more advanced processing and like making dubstep sounding stuff, that's not important to you. But that's like something that's really valuable to me, I think. And so I like to kind of talk about that just as a concept that you can use in whatever situation feels right to you. If you want more realistic sounding drums, then you can do it that way. If you want more realistic sounding synths, so that's just like an interesting concept. And this stuff, there's also something to be said for like making it evolve over the course of longer periods of time. So like I could have made this cool little pattern here at the end with this little pew laser thingy, because it flows really well with these drums. That little pew 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 thing, it sounds really clear, and so I could be like, oh, that's the great pattern, and I could have repeated it a bunch of times, and instead I save it for the 4th time through, the 4th measure of every phrase, and it helps it kind of gain energy. So like that's another thing that's important. Just I guess that's more of a songwriting thing, not really related to mixing, but yeah, that's just how you get a bunch of layers to work well together. That like call and response is super important when you have something else that like take the stage for a second, and then something else can kind of take over after that thing is done. That's super valuable. Yeah.
You tried playing it and it didn't work.
Yeah.
This is just it's so sad that my CPU can't handle this while Skyping, I think, is the problem, because usually when I'm at this sample rate, it works fine. It also sucks because it's just a big project. This is a more expansive project than stuff that I do.
Gotcha. Well, does anyone have any other questions or comments about his process on the drop or like the other small details that he explained?
I guess I have a question.
Uh-oh.
It's nothing big. A lot of people, when I ever send them my tracks or something, they say, oh, this needs more energy. Can you try to put more energy in it? And I'm just sitting there like, how does that? How do you do that?
Well,
that is a tough thing to think about.
Well, Mike, if I may interrupt, well, I did. Sorry, but would you be willing to hear a track of his to understand what he's saying more and then elaborate?
Yeah, of course. And we can maybe see like there are gonna be elements like just describing something as energetic or not energetic comes down to the mix oftentimes.
Okay.
So John could probably screen share. I think, unless
Yeah,
I would
go ahead
screw
and turn
everything
this
up.
I was
Yeah.
talking.
Hold on.
Or I thought you were just gonna link a song. Or
Yeah,
Or that.
yeah, link on Facebook or wherever, and then we can just listen through my shitty speakers because that's what we're doing. It's sad. I wish there was a way. I guess it would have been super easy if we were on my PC, but just because I'm on my Mac, Skype doesn't let me screen share.
dude, I am not
I'll just link it
endorsing
to you through
the
Facebook or
Mac.
SoundCloud.
I don't like Apple products. I had an iPhone for a couple months because my old Samsung died, and the iPhone was just like the easiest thing for me to get. It was like my dad's old iPhone, but I just bought myself a new phone. I got the Galaxy S8, and oh baby, to be back.
I guess another thing to take note of in the meantime is notice how, not even production wise, just notice how big his itinerary of samples is. And that's like something
Yeah.
that I explained in like the first couple of meetings is just to get as much as you can, just so that you're able to experiment. I'm pretty sure Mike just like goes through a bunch of different samples and experiments with it because he just has them. So I mean,
Yeah, I just like type in whatever I'm looking for. So if I'm like, man, I really want like a sound effect that sounds really metallic, then I can just type in like metal, and it'll bring in a bunch of weird samples if my computer decides that it wants to. There we go. So now we've just got like 20 or 30 metal sounds. I don't know what they are, but yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was wanting.
Yeah.
Alright, anyway.
That's kind of what I need to do too, because I have like an okay library of samples, but I feel like the past few times I've tried I just go on Splice and try to find samples. I've been looking a lot recently for like acoustic drum samples because a lot of the ones I have are like EDM based, like kicks
Gabe.
and snares. Yeah.
Gabe, if
What?
you go on Reddit, there's a subreddit I'll link to that has like a bunch of free sample packs.
Oh, sweet. Well, there we go. Because yeah, they all just you can just very obviously tell they're like sine waves with a white noise tail.
Right,
And yeah,
bunch of the Vengeance style samples are
yeah.
at this point sadly overused. Now they can be used in interesting ways. Like a lot of the Vengeance stuff kind of sounds like 80s drums if you think about it. So like a lot of old 80s drum machines are basically using that really simple processing. Like they're just really simple synthesized drums, and then the way that they make them interesting is through effects processing as well. So same thing, adding reverb to the top, keeping the low end mono, doing like weird things where you can have like mono for a second and then kind of expand. Things like that will kind of flesh out your drums and make them sound more lively. That can help with energy for sure. Like a lot of the effects processing is what adds energy to a track. And so like never be afraid to put a lot of effects on something if it sounds good, if it doesn't kind of muddy this too much. Another way to do it is to add a bunch of those effects so it sounds ridiculous and then resample it and cut the transient shorter, so you have all those crazy wide and spacey effects and then it's all just to milliseconds or whatever, and you've got a good sample.
Okay, sweet.
Wait, yeah, did you send me something, John?
Yeah, through SoundCloud here.
Okay.
Thought I did.
what do you
Might have
think?
to just-
Seeking management,
Might have
Mike?
to refresh.
No, I actually was about to comment on that because I changed that the other day and then I forgot that I changed it until just now, and I looked at it and I was like, man, what a douche. Seeking management. Get
Are
out
you
of
seeking management?
I guess so. I don't know why. I think I put that because I saw that somebody else had it, and I was like, "Oh, that's smart." Like just in case there are managers on SoundCloud, but I don't know if I want a SoundCloud manager.
Yeah, me.
Yeah,
Never know.
change bio to bro. No, I meant like the actual like in that case in the SoundCloud culture, the bio would be bro in this case.
Yeah. I guess.
Would you mind sharing some experiences you've had in a live setting? And I guess while we wait again.
I should have sent it to him.
Yeah.
You might just need to refresh your
Let me see.
page.
Go in here. Hello, would you be interested in doing a repost for repost?
I love that.
Close sound flower here. There we go. Cool. All right, I'm ready. I kind of want to listen to this on my headphones so I can actually listen to it, but then you
Yeah.
guys will be able to hear it.
No. I mean, I would rather prefer you listen to your headphones.
Yeah,
If you
'cause
guys
I've heard it too.
keep each other entertained here for a second.
No, we will. So this is our artist field trip. You know, we're out here on the internet. You know, we're meeting M Cubed over here, just going out and about.
What the hell is happening up here?
Headphones. So
Yeah.
so that's just like another story of an output device.
Because I plugged in my headphones. Yeah. No, it's just a mess, dude. Macs suck. All right, I'm just gonna listen to this. I can still hear you guys, I guess. So
I feel like
and
that-
I can talk about it. So.
Okay. Well, before we end, we should definitely attack Mike about his mastering chain. I feel like that's also important.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna
that's
attack him real
actually,
good.
yeah.
It's so simple. Actually, it's even simpler in this one than normal.
I still want to see it though, because I didn't even know there was such a thing until
Yeah.
until Elijah asked me. He's like, "Hey, what's on your master?" And I said, "What?" That's pretty much it.
I was the same way.
I asked Jonathan Jeevs that, and he like gave me such an impressive because I think like I think Jonathan is doing a really good job at mixing, and I was like, I wonder what he's doing, and then I asked him, he's like, I don't really do much on the master.
Mhm.
Like what?
It's all mixing.
It's all the mixing. It's all the mixing.
Yeah. But the new song though has some mastering on it. More compression.
Hmm.
Elijah, how's your day going?
Pretty good. Learning about what these kids like at my school that I teach, and a lot of them are big fans of Jake Paul, and it's getting really concerning.
Oh, bro.
Oh, that's exciting.
Can't get into this world. I'm terrified.
Scary. All those little kids.
They're
What do you
try-
teach?
I teach music and robotics, and also reading.
Oh, geez. That's awesome, though.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
actually kind of cool.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. It definitely is kind of cool. I think the most interesting part is learning about the psychological aspect of children. You can see like who's screwed up and who's not from an early age. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
We had to take a kid out of our school because he was literally antisocial. Not like not talking to people, but like wanting
Like
to.
antisocial personality disorder.
Yes,
Like the legitimate.
he would be like
That's
really.
not
He
good.
would be really fond of red markers because it would remind him of blood, and like when it was coloring
Oh, God.
time, he would like draw him like stabbing his family. It was so-
Yeah,
and
What?
it was very concerning.
Oh,
And
God.
and like to add along with that, he was just very
That's not
bad with
good.
the other kids. Just very bad with the other kids. I don't know.
Yeah, the kid's going nowhere good.
But it's kind of like psychopathic because he would smile about it and he would hug the teachers. It'd be really strange.
That's really weird. I don't like that at all.
I don't like that. Yeah, I don't think we like that part. Well, Jonathan, you've been really quiet. So, like, what's been going like through your mind, like during this like
I've just
session?
been taking it in, listening, you know.
Okay, gotcha.
Just like
Just
paying
enjoying.
attention.
Nice. Yeah, dude, this is sick. All right, so I would say like the energy comment that people maybe made is probably due to some of the mixing. So like there are fewer elements that are hitting you in the face, like fewer elements that are in that kind of high mid register that kind of are crispy. Like the main things that are crispy are the drums and like maybe one of the lead synths in the middle section, like in the drop sections. And then, like I was saying a minute ago, the effects processing, I think, can be amped up a little bit. So, like, especially here in the intro, there are a couple of synths that are really dry. And even if you want them to maintain kind of a really close and, like, intimate feel, even just having, like, 5% of it going to a delay or a reverb or something weird
Right.
will help add that extra space. And can kind of take up a little bit more of that high end register that I think is lacking. So like you can do
Now, keep
rather
in mind
than
that I do plan on adding vocals to this.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, well, that maybe is the difference then, because like having space for vocals is a big deal. I think you can also have bigger dynamic changes. So like the peaks in the intro are the same as the peaks during the drop. Obviously, I'm not using SoundCloud as an apt spectrum analyzer or whatever, like a graph here, but just like listening to it, there's not as much of a build up and change in tone or volume in different elements, so you can like really hold back, like really keep it chill in the intro. Like even listening to pop music, like they'll have like one element or something, even if it's still super compressed, it's still a lot quieter before it hits a chorus or a drop. And that can also help add energy because it gives you more like space. You know, if you're already starting it pretty loud and you're trying to get to really loud, it's not going to be as exciting or energetic, you know, to use the terms that you were saying people were talking about. But yeah, no, like overall it's really strong. And I would say like structurally you can maybe add in, like with the vocals, it'll maybe sound like different enough from section to section. But if you wanted to like have a bridge section or like a solo or something weird just to mix it up a little bit more too, I think that would help. Even though it's a shorter song, it still has space for like at least one more kind of section or one more kind of breakdown that just mixes up the energy.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
But yeah, overall,
thank
cool.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully
Appreciate
that's kind of helpful. All right, so I think we were moving on to mastering. Here it is. So again, like I said, this is not the current thing that I use, sadly, because on my desktop I have Ozone 7, which has these cool presets by this guy Greg Calby. So I think for this one I'm just like doing some simple cuts. So I have like a cut at 25 hertz, which is just like to be safe in case there's any noise down there. Cut at 200, like 2 decibels. Cut at 1K because I don't like the kind of high nasally tones, especially for this, right? Especially for Thirsty, where it's so spacey and lush sounding. I wanted like as little as possible of the stuff that kind of hits you in the middle of your face.
Now, do these cuts apply to every song that you produce, or is it just specific songs?
These are just for this. So like on the newer preset, I think there's a different situation. I forget what the cut is on the preset that I use for Ozone 7, but it's one that kind of excites even more on the high end. So like this one has 50% mix. I'm pretty sure the Greg Calby one I use is like 80% or something stupid. Also, I don't use retro anymore. I don't know if you guys have messed around with Ozone at all, but retro is pretty good if you're going for kind of crispier stuff and it's soft. But if you try to push it at all, you get, so it says like transistor-like harmonics, which means like really kind of grimy, crunchy harmonics, and it sounds a little too digital for my taste. So even though it says retro, it sounds more digital. And then tape is a much smoother sound, or even the tube. So those are options for if you're using an exciter or something like that. But yeah, then the mastering chain here has a threshold of -2. Now on this one, I think I push it all the way, which means that I'm just already peaking pre-master, which is not as smart to do. You know, it's passable with electronic music because so many people are just making loud shit right now. But to make something that's going to kind of match up with like the broader world of music, it's smarter to leave more space. So on the Greg Calby preset, I have my threshold at -8, and then I make sure that when my stuff is hitting, so I'll show you this really quick. When my stuff is hitting, this is at +4, which is stupid because of threshold. So I would make sure that this is at -3 to -6, or like -3 to -6 instead. Yeah, sorry for just blasting myself here. I guess you guys didn't hear that. I just deafened myself a little bit. Yeah, so that's the mastering chain, and this is all just within Ozone. I also used to put, I don't think I have it on this computer again, sadly. Most of my stuff is on my desktop, but I used to put like this mix gel chain on here. Let me see if I can find it. I think I actually would just do like a compressor that had, yeah, there it is, mix gel. So this is nice, and it just like kind of softens peaks. So like anytime something's coming through. All right, let me turn this down since it doesn't matter. You guys can't hear it. I'm just going to show visually what's happening. So we've got like 2 or 3
Yeah.
decibels of gain reduction and then 4 decibels boosted in the output.
Mhm.
So it's like just a really soft ratio compressor. And something like this is sometimes useful. I still use this often on for my newer stuff.
Ooh, Gabe,
'Cause
we
it
just
can
went through that, Gabe.
push
Yeah.
push it a little bit, right? And it just kind of softens some of the peaks, so that if you have like one element that's standing out just a little too much, that mix gel on the master can help. Obviously, you can mix and mess around up in here too, but this just kind of helps everything glue together just that tiny bit more.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, if I'm making something that I want, so like for the song that John just sent me, I would say you can compress less overall. So like have more of the elements give more space. Whether that means you're shortening something or adding space by like having something be more verbed out and then something else more in the center, that kind of thing. That way it doesn't sound as homogeneous. So like doing a compressor on the master or even like bus compression helps stuff kind of stick together and like sound like it's all coming from the same place, right? Or like coming from the same space or something like that. It's kind of a weird concept to think about, but it's like it makes your brain think, oh, this is all like cohesive and put together, and that's good after you've already made everything sound disparate. You have to make your elements stand out from each other before you want to put something like this on the master chain. So it's important. It's important to kind of there are like these weird balances, like Elijah was saying, where as you do one thing, you have to like cut out certain things to make it work better. And in the same vein, like you sometimes have to fight against yourself to find that proper balance. So you'll be like, all right, I'll take this really short sample and extend it, or this really long sample and shorten it, or to take certain things that are really aggressive sounding and make them softer, things like that, where you're kind of fighting against what is easy in order to make something that sounds unique and more energetic, because you'll be adding more of your own like style, your own taste.
So
Sweet.
what I notice personally is that when people group into different or buses, they have like audio processing on their own buses, and you don't have audio processing on your buses. Why is that? And what can you say against that?
In this situation, it was because I didn't have anything that I wanted to work across all of these. Again, this is not exactly my current workflow. Nowadays, I actually use a lot more of the return channels that Ableton offers. So if I have a return channel, right, and then I put an effect here, then I can send something to it. And that's really useful, both for making things kind of stick together. So I'll usually have like a really short verb, and I'll put some of my drums, and I'll put some of my synths. In this situation, in most situations, it's usually individual synths, not a whole group. The groups are mostly to help me organize. So like in this situation, the only thing that has group effects on it are my drums, because I verb them all out and I use a frequency shifter to make them sound like more high pitched for the buildup. If I wanted to do sidechain compression across like the whole synth group, that would be a possibility. If I just do like a subtle sidechain, that could work. But overall, since I want, like I said, all of my elements to kind of stand on their own, I'm okay when they don't sound homogeneous or cohesive, because I like things sounding a little more like scattered and like I like when I'm listening to something and I'm like, oh shit, where did that come from? Instead of something just like coming in the same part of the mix. I like when something kind of comes out of left field, left stereo field. But yeah. So I don't always use processing on my groups, but it is, like Elijah said, very common to do a lot of processing on large groups of instruments.
So what are other, like, I guess like a general question is like, what are other like common things you would throw in a master? Like, it's kind of hard to make blanket statements about things like that, I guess, but I know you have like a multi-band, I guess, and like an EQ, things like that, but I don't really know.
This setup is pretty standard as far as I can tell. So like I have the EQ first, and then the multi-band compressor, which is not really doing much as far as I remember. Yeah, I don't think it's really doing anything on this other than Yeah, no, I don't actually. It's not doing anything. Okay, cool. And then the exciter is basically just a distortion. So you could use saturator or like something else like that if FL or whatever programs you guys are using has that kind of stuff. And then a limiter. So like the important elements are EQ, exciter if you want it to sound crunchy, and limiter. In my opinion, those are the only things you really need. But I don't consider myself like a mastering engineer. I've had other people master my stuff, and it comes out sounding cool, but it's just different because it's not how I would master it. Like I know that my mastering is not as loud or as as clean as other people, but I just like that it's mine. I just make it like my own weird master. And it's it's comparable enough to the loudness of most stuff on SoundCloud. Sadly, there is kind of the loudness wars that you may be familiar with, right? Like there's this whole idea of people kind of bucking that trend. Like Chuck Sutton is somebody who I think does a really good job of mixing his stuff very quiet, but maintains good transient, and like his stuff is mixed really interestingly. It works for his style of music because his style of music is, it's a banger, but it's not supposed to be in your face. It's very jazz oriented, which is cool. So yeah, they're just kind of a variety of possibilities, but I would say those three main elements of EQ and exciter or multiband, like you're saying, and then a limiter on the top.
All right, cool.
Yeah. And you can honestly get the same kind of effects. Like if your stuff is mixed well, you can get a sound that's just as clean without having to use something like Ozone. You can do it just with stock plugins. Like I've seen people just use plugins within Ableton or like stuff that's built in, because it's just a matter of finding what works for you. Because you push it differently. So like in this one where I had it set to a higher threshold, -2 instead of -8. For this, I can push it harder and it still sounds okay compared to -8, where I was, getting sloshed in the face because it was too loud. So you just have to mix a little bit differently depending on what the mastering chain looks like.
What's a phase scope for?
It's just a visualizer. Oh, this, yeah.
Oh, so like the stereo image?
Yeah, and it just shows it shows that little wobble that I have with an autopan. But yeah.
Dope.
I mean, sometimes it's just really good to like visualize your music. You can get very distracted or lost, or if you want to get on track in another way other than audio, you have a spectrum to follow.
Is that kick? Got a lot of width on it.
Let's see here.
All right, so
do you tune your drums?
I don't always. Well, I was talking about that earlier a little bit. So like with this, I did tune the kick, which I don't normally do. So like the kick is literally tuned to a note and then it's following the bass line, because I wanted it to sound less like a kick and more like an 808 on its own right. And then I have a little sub that comes in like sometimes. It's more sporadic than the kick, which is really fun. Like I like that about this track. I think it sets it apart because rather than having just a short kick sample and a long sub, I've got a short kick sample that's tuned like it's an 808 or a sub, and that way it gives me more space to kind of be really frantic and hectic with my synth play. It just kind of gives it a different energy. But typically I just make sure that my drums sound good with my track. So I'll say, okay, this kick needs to be up or down a few steps because it just doesn't fit in this frequency spectrum of the arrangement.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more time you wanted to fill, Elijah, but I am currently in my parents' living room because I'm on my laptop, and I am about to go back home so that I can get back to my actual space.
I
had to drop my little brother off here because we went rock climbing. So.
Right.
Okay. Well, do you guys have any
timing work?
Do you guys have any other questions?
I'm down to keep going. I still have time, maybe 20 more minutes or something if you guys still have questions and stuff. But yeah, whenever.
Okay,
whenever
cool. So sorry about that, Mike. So sorry.
Oh no, you're good. The timing worked out because I was like trying to figure out what I could do. Like I just dropped back by my place to pick up my laptop before coming here so that I could do it here rather than at my place, which is fine because I couldn't use my desktop anyways. But
Yeah.
Are you guys just letting it sink in?
thirsty.
Yeah, I'm looking at questions that I wrote down.
All right, just gonna go on page 30. Got to see all my questions. So.
Yeah.
What things do you think of, like, kind of more on a conceptual level, or like a more, I guess, just like on a broader aspect, like anything that you struggle with? When
I guess at this point, like, let me see. At this point, I'm kind of just trying to work on, like, I can make like a loop or anything, like you said earlier. Like, you can spend a whole lot of time trying to get just a single loop to sound the way you want it to. And then I can also like expand on that a little more and like add a different section if I want to. But right now I'm working on transitions a lot and adding extra little like fills or like percussion samples or whatever to try to like make it just more exciting, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird because so far what I have is there's like little fills that I've tried to throw in, and maybe they work fine, but they seem almost like too predictable because it's hard for me to imagine in my head something that would sound like exciting and came out of nowhere.
To have like an unpredictable fill, you mean, or like something that kind of builds.
Yeah.
You can think of oftentimes like changing something either effects based or tonally, like within the elements that you're already using, is a really good way, because it's less predictable because it's not that it's less predictable, it's just more it adds more energy, in my opinion, because if you bring in a new element that kind of comes out of nowhere, even if it's unpredictable, it's still kind of like, oh whoa, there was a drum fill, and you might have been expecting a drum fill because it's the end of the fourth bar or whatever, and you're just ready for something to add some energy. And instead of doing that, if you have something that verbs out, or something that pitches up, or something that kind of takes a new effect onto it, that's already in your mix, that can be more unpredictable and exciting, because you can have like a chord progression or something. Like actually, here's a good example. Like my drums, right? The build-up is pretty predictable. It just kind of gets a little faster. I think the claps kind of stabilize, actually, right? So like the claps aren't building up to this like fever pitch or anything. It's just that the frequency shifter on the drums is steadily going up from this point, and that's what adds the energy for this drop. So like that's what makes the transition interesting, because you have something unusual happening from an effects standpoint on something that's very usual. You have a very standard drum buildup, a lot of claps and some kicks coming in, and then the drop happens, and it adds energy because there's also the sustain on this, which I forgot about. Like the kicks are really short for the intro. They're like 600 millisecond decay with no sustain, and then I just open it up so that it's the full sample when the drop happens. So you can have stuff like that where like a sound that you're already familiar with changes completely from one section to another, and that adds a lot of energy, because you can be listening to that kick and you're like, okay, cool, it's a kick, that's a kick, and then you're like, oh shit, the kick's now an 808, and that's an exciting thing. And I think stuff like that is almost always more exciting than putting a Vengeance like reverse sample or a big tom fill or something, even though I still use that as well. Hey, what do you know, Vengeance reverse.
Nice.
Right.
Of course. And this is just mixed a little bit lower in the mix, but I'm glad that was there. I thought there might be one down here, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm gonna see if this works. So that was good timing.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So yeah, like there are a lot of different ways to get energy and to make transitions really dynamic. And you're already on the right track by like just experimenting, like mess around with fills and different elements that can kind of add some flair to those transitions, so it doesn't just sound like a loop repeating.
Yeah. Okay, sweet.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. That's pretty much it for me. Those are all my questions.
Cool. Yeah. What do you guys feel like you learned? I'm kind of curious, like just to get some feedback from me, because I don't do production lessons really very much. I've just done a few like in person, but never over the internet.
I mean, I kind of like learned a lot. I mean, I gotta let it soak in, and then I'm probably gonna watch it again whenever I get the recording. But yeah, it was kind of cool getting to actually see like the breakdown. It's always cool seeing the breakdown of like other people's projects
Yeah, for sure.
because you get so used to looking at your own that your own projects feel way too predictable. So you sort of just know them like the back of your hand. But
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yeah, it's good to branch out, and you can do that. Like you were saying earlier, like watching seamless tutorials and other stuff like that,
Yeah.
where people. I mean, for me, when I listen to stuff like that, or if I used to watch some of Mr. Bill's stuff where he would just be like producing random shit, right? And his
Yeah.
workflow is so different and like so bizarre, and not necessarily something I would do, because like even though I think our music has some similarities, I'm overall like going in a different direction, but I can still appreciate, like, even from an outside perspective, saying, oh, he's going this way because of X. Like, just to watch his very purposeful methods is super helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. You didn't keep anything back. Explained everything super in depth. Yeah, it was awesome.
I guess
Appreciate you taking
yeah,
time out of your day too, and
that's true.
explaining
Thank
stuff
you.
and helping us out.
Yeah,
Of
thanks.
course. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
I guess if to conclude it, if we're all pretty comfortable with like the mixing aspect, or like we got enough information, let's like kind of like end it with like just the musical part about it. Like, what do you think is important when writing a composition, when making a composition, in terms of melody or chord progressions or arrangement, or and actually something that I really kind of want you to talk about is the transitions after a drop, because usually people lose inspiration once they hit a drop, or right before a drop once they hit a drop, and they don't know what to do after they finish a drop, or a
Right.
chorus.
Yeah, having that like energy maintained between choruses or between drops is really difficult. I think that's one of the coolest challenges. Sometimes I do it by having more of a switch up. So like in this track, this is actually, in my opinion, one of my less interesting transitions out of a drop. It still maintains energy, but it's not the best example from like an energy maintenance standpoint, because it just kind of fades out. I'm pretty sure I just do the dry wet on the drums here, so it's like literally the drums just kind of going up so that they're all the way wet, and then they come back for a second and then they cut out. So it's just kind of a weird little transition. I forget what else the other stuff does, but yeah, like from a broader conceptual standpoint, I think the important thing to think about is like what you're building to next. So kind of like I talked about at the beginning, when you're writing something, it's not necessarily about, oh, that transition out of the drop. It doesn't necessarily matter as much as what's this transition leading to next, unless it's your outro, at which point you can do something different.
Yeah.
But even then, if your outro is dramatically different, or even just kind of thematically different, you want it to kind of be foreshadowed as much as possible. So like there are often times where I'll build a transition out of the drop, and I'll kind of add a new layer or two in this little breakdown, and then after I've done that, I'll take those new layers from the breakdown and put a little peek of them into the drop, and be like, oh, this last drop is going to have, or this last phrase of the drop is going to have this little element that kind of builds up and is then shown off in the breakdown. So that's a really good way to smoothly transition out of a chorus. But yeah, pretty much same advice. Like whenever you're looking for inspiration, like Elijah was saying, if you are running out of inspiration after your drop, just keep moving, keep going forward until you find that next thing that's exciting, and you're like, okay, cool, second drop is double time, or has this new synth, or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
And you can start taking some of those elements and kind of sneaking them back as far back as possible. And there are some really cool songs that, if you pay attention to, will have structural elements like all throughout the track. So you'll have like a sneak peek of the second drop in the first bar of the song, or something stupid like that. And it's just super cool to me to see that kind of like playfulness with the form, where you're like just bouncing around. Sorry, I keep banging stuff. Where you're just bouncing around, so that you can kind of give the track a very cohesive feel, even when there are a bunch of different sections that are all over the place. So yeah, hopefully that kind of makes sense. That's a response to Elijah's original question. So like that energy between the drops is just the same idea of like kind of continuing forward. I guess from like a broader musical standpoint, like thinking about chord progressions and other stuff, my biggest concept that I kind of talk about when I'm teaching people more about songwriting than production is to maintain like a balance of simple versus complex elements, which sounds really like technical, and I guess it kind of is. So like you take your raw idea. So if I just have a day where I'm feeling blue and I'm like jamming on the piano and I'm really letting my emotions out, I'll kind of start with that really raw element, and then I'll think, okay, what can I do to make this complex thing simple, or this simple thing more complex, or maybe I'm layering simple things in a complex way, things like that. Because you want there to be enough things that are simple and kind of grab you to like catch your attention, and then from that point you want those simple things to lead you into a broader complex idea, or kind of lead you down to listen to the details. I love when I'm listening to a song and I hear like a excuse me, I hear like a catchy melody or something that kind of has a quality that's just very simple and in your face and upfront. And then as you listen to the song more than once and you kind of delve into the finer details, you listen to that stuff going on in the background and you're like, oh shit, there are all these things that are supporting that simple lead line, making that simple lead line really stand out. So that's like a really important thing in songwriting and arranging, just to like have those layers that stick in your face and they're catchy and they, you know, get stuck in your head, and then you have the layers that support that in a really cool and complex way.
Right. All right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right, dude. That's pretty sick. I guess just to end this, what type of underwear are you wearing?
They're boxers from the Gap.
Dude, classic Gap. Mike is a big Gap supporter.
It's like the most affordable / comfortable / I have a credit card there, so I get rewards points. So I bought 2 pairs of underwear and 3 pairs of socks for $0.
Look at that, dude.
Build up that credit.
It was very for me.
Dude, that's
awesome.
That's what MCube stands for.
That's my final review.
That's the final review. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and going overboard in time. I really do appreciate you doing that. Thank you for like sharing the information, your mastering chain. But
Secrets.
Yeah, all the secrets, yeah. Does anyone else have any last questions before we conclude and wrap everything up?
No, I'm good.
All right, dude.
Feeling good.
Well, who's coming to the after party? So Skrillex is gonna do his thing over there.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Goes till 6 a.m.
All right. Well, once again, thank you again, Mike.
Absolutely.
If anything, I guess I'll send you the video too, and I'll try uploading the video as soon as I can. So basically, the artist's videos are like uploaded in like intervals. So like we're all gonna get them once the last meeting is done. But the video I'll just upload it like right now.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool.
Yeah, maybe
Solid.
I'll share that to like some people if they have production questions or something.
They're like, "Hey, Mike, can you?" And then you're like, "Yeah, here."
It's an hour and a half video of me talking with
Just watch
people.
this.
Right.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, I guess that's it. Artist is out. The field trip is over. Gotta go home now.
Right. All right.
Peace out, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Take care, guys.
See ya. You too.
Video.